Welcome to the Membership Guys podcast. Kick-ass advice and tips for membership site owners.
Hey guys, welcome to episode 194 of the Membership Guys podcast. I'm Mike Morrison, your host for the show. Thank you so much for joining me for another installment of the number one podcast for membership site owners. This week is the second of 3 trips back into the archives from the past few years of the Membership Guys podcast. There's so much gold back in those archives. And unless you've been listening from the very start, or unless, you got a little bit carried away on binge listening to episodes of this podcast, chances are that some of the best episodes that we've created have actually passed you by. We've covered a lot of ground in the last 190 odd episodes of this show. So every now and then we decide to go back into the archives and handpick some of our favorite or just some of the most useful or important topics from the past 3 years or so, and then we bump them back to the top. We bring them back to your attention, maybe add a little bit of extra info to them just to ensure that you are getting the absolute best from the Membership Guys podcast. So last week's trip into the vault dealt with how to streamline the content production process for your membership. One of the biggest tasks that membership site owners have to deal with. If you haven't checked that out, certainly go and listen to that after this episode. But this week, we're talking about the other big priority that membership site owners have in the day-to-day running of their business, and that is the community. Most memberships are primarily consisting of content and community. Now, so much time and so much effort goes into the content side of things, creating courses, putting together workbooks and downloads and all that sort of stuff. And I think sometimes it's easy to think, well, the community will just kind of take care of itself. I just need to show up and help people and all will be fine. But it's not always smooth sailing. Now, one of the best things about running a membership site is that we get to dictate the pace. We get to decide what sort of culture we want our membership to have. We get to decide how we position it, how we market it, what our message is, so that we can attract the sort of members that we most want to work with. However, no matter how hard you try to only attract the right type of people to your membership, you will at some point inevitably experience problem members. Sometimes it might just be a personality clash where certain members just rub you or rub each other up the wrong way. However, there will be instances where you'll need to deal with potentially toxic elements among your member base inside your community. So, how do you deal with them? That's what we dug into back in episode 85 of the Membership Guys podcast about 2 years ago, and we're bringing that back out of the archives to help you if you are dealing with problem members in your community. So in this episode, we're going to look at the questions you need to ask yourself before dealing with a problem member to make sure that you're not having any sort of knee-jerk responses or you're not overreacting. We also look at how to implement a 2-tier strike-based approach to dealing with issues in your community. We're also talking about how to know when it's the right time to kick out difficult members and the process and the steps that you would take in order to remove someone from your membership. So for anyone running a community as a key part of your membership site, this episode is absolute essential listening. So without further ado, let's jump back into episode 85 of the Membership Guys podcast, how to deal with problem members in your community. So the first thing you need to ask yourself, honestly, is this member really a problem? Or is it just a case of you don't like them? There's some sort of personality clash. They've been rubbing you up the wrong way. You don't have to be friends with all of your members. And as your membership site grows, there's more and more chance that you'll have personality clashes with some of the people who join. It's just unrealistic to expect that when you have hundreds and hundreds of members, you're going to gel with each and every one of them. As you get more and more people in your membership, there will be more times where someone is posting who you just don't connect with, or to you, they just seem a little bit odd. Maybe their sense of humor is dry. Maybe they're very blunt and direct and you're not a big fan of that. But if this person isn't negatively affecting the experience of others, then they're not necessarily a problem member. It's just a member you don't particularly like. But if they are causing problems, if you've had complaints, if they're triggering arguments or offending people, maybe they're posting offensive or inappropriate materials, then you've got a problem. And you're going to have to think about how you actually deal with them to get them to either change their behavior or kick them out of your membership. Now, it's important not to overreact. If somebody's stirring the pot a little bit, or if a discussion gets heated, you don't want to come down on them like a ton of bricks and start banning people left, right, and center. You don't want the sort of membership community that is a totalitarian regime where people are scared to express their opinions or scared to be passionate about what they're there for. And in some markets, those sort of passions are going to be inspired just by nature of the topic. But there is a definite difference between people who are just passionate and expressive and people who are a toxic element to your membership. The approach that we recommend is to have a 2-tier strike-based approach and have this as an internal yardstick for figuring out how to deal with these kind of situations. Again, it's not the sort of thing where you necessarily want to lay down these really tight, strict rules on your community, because that can have an adverse effect on how people interact, how people behave. And chances are, if someone's worried about breaking the rules, then that might actually stop them from contributing or stop them from engaging as much. So with this kind of approach we're talking about, a 2-tier strike-based approach, just keep that internal and use that as your own guideline and the guideline for staff or moderators who you may have helping you out on how to deal with these kind of situations. So the first tier, it really relates to the type of situation you have, the type of issues. If it's a case of a member who is causing friction in your community, they're rubbing people up the wrong way, they are causing offense, they're starting arguments, and they're generally just being a little bit unpleasant, then approach them with a 2-strike approach. So strike number 1, you warn them. You contact them privately, and it's always better that this is done privately rather than having drama play out on your forum, because that's not going to reflect well on you or the member. Contact them privately, let them know in no uncertain terms what the situation is, be clear about the issue, and make sure they know that you're not happy with it, that it's not an approach or an attitude that's going to stand, and that if there's a problem again, the next step will be that they'll be removed from the community. So if it is just someone being a bit unpleasant and causing friction, give them that warning, that's their first strike, and let them know that second strike, they're out. However, if this is a member who's actively harassing or threatening other members, that's stealing or ripping off your content, or that's posting extremely inappropriate materials on your site, then instantly remove them. That's not something you can tolerate in your community. And so rather than giving them a warning, because that kind of behavior isn't deserving of a warning shot, you get rid of them right away. Shut that down. Those people can be extremely toxic. They can cause you to lose members, and depending on what they're actually doing, especially if they're threatening, abusing, harassing members, that can land you in hot water. So you need to shut that down. So if you're actually issuing a warning, so if it is someone on their first strike, just fully explain the issue. Don't enter into an argument or be hostile. Don't be accusatory or, stoke the fires and potentially cause an even bigger problem. Make sure that they just know that your policy is first strike. You make them aware of the problem. You let them know it's not acceptable from your perspective, and that the second strike will be removal. Be clear in saying that it's not something you take pleasure in, it's not something you want to happen, and your hope is that just making them aware that there's been complaints or that there's an issue will be enough to get things back on a positive track. Definitely approach it with a positive mindset, because it may well be that this person just doesn't realize how they're being perceived. People have all sorts of different styles, all sorts of different attitudes, and what we see as something that is a negative, or even what other people will see as a negative, that person may actually think they're just being funny. It may just be their way. Maybe they just don't realize that they're causing problems. So don't go in there with hostility. Go in there with a positive outlook, and genuinely approach it from the mindset that you would love to turn this around and make this a positive and have that person contribute in a far more positive way in your community. But on the back of that, what I would definitely say is keep an eye on their behavior after you contact them. Don't allow this private communication to devolve into an argument or mudslinging or a he said, she said, or if you tell them there's been complaints, don't allow them to demand or get the names of people, especially out of you who's complained. Just make it clear that this is a situation, this is our reaction to it, this is what happens next. We don't want that to happen, and that's the line drawn. You're not entering discussion, you're just letting them know how it is. But you want to keep an eye on how they then behave in your community. If you are using something like ActiveCampaign or Entreport or Infusionsoft where you have site tracking enabled, then just take a look. What pages are they going to? If suddenly you give someone a warning and then you see that they're going through every single piece of content on your website and it looks like maybe they're downloading everything or they're copying everything and they're planning on running off, then that might prompt you into taking some sort of action. Now, if you are removing someone completely, so whether it's strike 2 for someone who's just been a problem element, or whether it's an instant removal when someone has clearly crossed the line, our advice is to cancel and remove their access before you email them to let them know you're cancelling them. Because what could happen is if you contact them and say there's a problem, we're going to remove your access, is if they happen to be online when they get that and they act quicker than you, they could start causing problems, whether that's posting stuff in your community, whether it's downloading everything, whether, there's all sorts of different things that could happen. So cancel and remove access to your website before you actually let them know that that's happening, just to safeguard yourself from any potential fallout. Now, if these guys are paying you on a recurring basis, cancel their subscription, both within your membership plugin and, if possible, within your payment processor, whether that's Stripe or PayPal or what have you. If you have the ability to cancel it within your payment processor, so there's no chance that they'll accidentally be rebilled later on. You may also want to consider refunding their most recent payment. If someone's a monthly billed member, then again, just refunding their monthly payment. Sure, it's a little bit of a financial hit, but that just limits the chance of any sort of blowback or of this turning into a case of them essentially saying, well, I paid for this access and you're restricting it from me, so, you're breaking the law or I'm going to take action. If you've refunded the entirety of their most recent payment, then there's not much they can say in response to that. You will likely get some people who come at you and say they want the whole of the sum of what they paid you so far refunded, but honestly, they don't really have a case for that if that's what they request, because they will have had full access to what they paid for that time. The refund of the most recent payment is purely to save you any hassle rather than doing it because you should do it or you need to do it or you're required to do it. Now, if someone is paying you on an annual basis, then again, you might want to think of doing a pro rata refund. So that means if someone's been a member for 4 months, but they paid for 12, it may be necessary to take that hit and refund them for the remaining 8 months. Again, to reduce blowback, to reduce any question over whether there's a legal issue about you not providing what's been paid for. Now, yes, that's a financial hit, but ultimately, the cost of not taking action could be way, way greater in terms of lost members, in terms of potential headaches that come later on. We would say to ensure there's something in your terms and conditions for your membership that makes it clear that you can revoke access at any time. Just so that if that's questioned or if that's brought up, you've got something to refer to as well. Something you may want to keep an eye out for, especially within the days and weeks after cancelling this member's membership and removing them, is keep an eye out for any suspicious enrollments, any names that seem a little bit off, email addresses that seem a bit off, people who are behaving oddly in terms of how they're using your website, because you can't put it past some people, especially if they're behaving in such a way that's had them banned from your site. You can't put it past them to try re-enrolling or resubscribing under a fake name. Now, it takes a particular type of person to waste their time in doing that, but I'm sure we've all encountered people like that in various walks of life. So again, it's just something you might want to be aware of. I've just said when it comes to removing people from your membership, there's definitely a far greater chance of fallout than if you have simply warned them about their behavior. But it's far preferable to keeping that kind of toxic element inside your membership. You need to remember this is your website, your business, your livelihood. You need to protect it and you're well within your rights to do so. It's so crucial to maintain harmony within your community, and to do that, you've got to remember you set the rules, you set the terms, and it's important that you take action when you have people who want to disrupt that harmony and threaten your business and your livelihood through their negative behaviors. All right, hope you guys found that little trip into the vault useful. I do hope that this is a situation that you'll never have to deal with. You know, some membership site owners get lucky. Sometimes you never have even the slightest hint of a problem inside your community. However, it's always worth at least knowing in the back of your mind how you would deal with a toxic element if it started to appear within your membership. Now, hopefully you are better equipped to deal with it. And for those of you who do have to deal with problems within your membership community on a day-to-day basis, I do hope you've been able to take away some practical tips for the best way of handling that in your membership too. That's it from me for this week. Next week is our final trip into the archives of the Membership Guys podcast before we resume regular scheduled programming. And for our final episode, we're going all the way back to one of our very, very first episodes of the show. So almost 4 years back into the archives, the furthest back we've ever gone. So make sure you tune in next week to find out which one it is. That's it from me for this week. Thanks again for spending time with me today. Truly appreciate each and every one of you. I am out of here, and I'll see you next week. If you've enjoyed today's episode of the Membership Guys podcast, we invite you to check out the membersiteacademy.com. The Member Site Academy is the essential resource for anyone at any stage of starting, growing, and running a membership website. So whether you're still figuring out what your idea is going to be, or whether your website is already up and running and you're just looking for ways to grow it and attract new members, then the Member Site Academy can help you to get to the next level. With our extensive course library, monthly training, exclusive member-only discounts, perks and tools, and a supportive, active community to help you along the way with feedback, encouragement and advice, the Member Site Academy is the perfect place to be for anyone looking to start, manage and grow a successful membership website. So check it out at membersiteacademy.com.